April 1975. Saigon still has lights. Still has street vendors calling out prices, scooters weaving through late afternoon heat. Families eating dinner like the future is a routine they can schedule. From the outside, it looks like a city that will keep running tomorrow exactly as it ran yesterday. But inside apartments and behind shop shutters, another truth is moving fast, quiet, merciless. People aren't arguing ideology. They're asking a question that sounds simple until it becomes physical. If the rules change overnight, what can I actually keep? Not what I paid for. Not what I can point to on a deed. Not what a bank book says. What can I keep when the people who enforce ownership decide the definition has changed? That is the hidden terror of transitions. You can wake up in the same house, on the same street, under the same sky, and still feel like you've been relocated because the borders moved around you. In moments like this, wealth stops being an accounting concept and becomes something older: mobility, usefulness, and the ability to rebuild. Vietnam 1975 is often remembered as politics, as war, as tragedy. But beneath those headlines is a pure economic lesson, one that repeats across centuries in different costumes. The most valuable wealth is not always the wealth you can store. It is the wealth you can carry, the wealth you can prove, and the wealth you can rebuild with. Because when systems shift, the first thing that collapses is not buildings. It's assumptions. And when assumptions die, the people who survive are rarely the people who guessed the date correctly. They read the people who built themselves in a way that didn't require perfect stability to function. Modern economies train people to believe wealth is a thing you can point to. A deed, a storefront, a retirement account, a number sitting safely in a ledger, waiting patiently for the day you need it. That belief is comforting because it makes stability feel permanent, and permanence is the drug of the middle class. It convinces you that tomorrow is a continuation, not a negotiation. It tells you the contract between you and the system is unbreakable because it has always been honored in your lifetime. But history keeps proving the opposite. Wealth is not only what you own. It is what you can still use after the rules change. Property is not merely bricks and soil. Property is a social contract and agreement enforced by institutions, courts, police, registries, banks, and the quiet compliance of everyone around you. In calm times, enforcement is so automatic you forget it exists. In crisis, enforcement becomes visible. And visibility is the moment you realize the system was always there, deciding which claims mattered and which claims were negotiable. That's why economic collapse is never purely economic. It's legal, it's administrative, it's psychological. It's power moving through paperwork. Sometimes it arrives as inflation that melts savings without confiscating a single physical object. Sometimes it arrives as a freeze temporary for stability where access becomes permission. Sometimes it arrives as reclassification where what you thought was yours is suddenly described in new words. And once your wealth lives inside words, whoever controls the words can control your wealth without touching a single brick. Vietnam 1975 is one of the clearest lenses for this because it compresses the truth into a single, unforgettable test. What survives when the rulebook changes faster than you can react? Before 1975, much of urban South Vietnam ran on a familiar promise: work, save, buy property, build stability. People climbed the same ladder modern people climb, one rung at a time. A middle class measured progress by assets, a home that appreciated, a shop that expanded, a small business that created a sense of control in a world that often feels uncontrollable. Families converted effort into shelter, shelter into status, status into security, and security into hope for their children. This is not a uniquely Vietnamese dream. It's the universal dream of any society that believes in tomorrow. The dream has a soundtrack: the scrape of coins into a jar, the careful folding of bills into an envelope, the quiet pride of the first key to a first home. It has a rhythm: sacrifice now, stability later. A father might skip small luxuries to buy tools, not for pleasure but for productivity. A mother might work longer hours so her children can learn skills that lift them above survival. A shop owner might keep records as carefully as a banker because their shop is not just a business. It's a shield against uncertainty. In stable times, that logic is rational. It's almost sacred. It's the social engine that turns patience into prosperity. But history has a cruel habit of reminding people that stability is not a moral reward. It is a condition, temporary, fragile, dependent on forces larger than any household. When those forces shift, a life built on predictable contracts can find itself suddenly standing on sand. And the terrifying part is that the sand looks normal until the moment you sink. When power shifts, the first thing that changes is rarely the skyline or the weather. The first thing that changes is the rulebook. What is allowed? What is forbidden? What is licensed? What is regulated? What is restructured? What is reallocated? What gets renamed into something administrative instead of violent? People imagine confiscation as a man with a weapon. Yet the modern version often begins with paperwork. It begins with definitions, with categories, with a new line in a document that decides what counts as legitimate ownership and what counts as something else. Here's the mechanism most people miss because it looks too clean to be violent. Ownership is a claim, and claims only matter when they can be enforced. In normal times, enforcement is automatic, so people forget it exists. In abnormal times, enforcement becomes selective, then political, then strategic. And you don't even need to take everything to change everything. You only need to narrow liquidity and mobility. You change what can be sold, what can be transferred, what can be converted into opportunity. You turn assets into stone not by removing them, but by removing the options attached to them. That is the invisible line between being wealthy and being safe. In calm times, a home is not only shelter. It's optionality. It can be sold, rented, leveraged, inherited. It can be turned into choices. In stressed times, a home can remain physically yours, yet stop functioning as a tool for freedom. You can touch the walls and still feel the doors closing, because what matters is not the object, but the range of actions you are allowed to take with it. After a rupture, the narrowing usually arrives in layers. First comes uncertainty, and uncertainty itself is a tax because it forces hesitation. Hesitation means you miss windows, and history rarely reopens windows for the people who missed them. Then come the phrases that always appear when a system tightens. Stability, order, protection, national interest, temporary measures. The word temporary is especially dangerous because it sounds gentle while it stretches like rubber under heat. Movement becomes monitored, trade becomes regulated. Certain businesses become sensitive. Certain transactions require approvals. Sometimes markets still exist, but they become markets of whispers, informal networks, favors, barter, trust. And in every tightening, the same hidden rule applies. The people closest to the rulemakers get flexibility. Everyone else gets procedures. In a transition, procedures are not neutral. Procedures are a fence. Vietnam 1975 forces the portability test in its harshest form. If you had to leave, what could you actually take with you? Most modern wealth fails immediately. A house cannot cross a border. Land cannot fit inside a suitcase. A business is not a building. It is suppliers, customers, licenses, distribution, and legal recognition. A bank account is not money in a pure sense. It is access, and access is conditional. In calm decades, those conditions are invisible, like air. In turbulent years, they become gates. And gates have gatekeepers. Even portable wealth can become complicated. Cash can be questioned. Valuables can be confiscated. Documents can be invalidated. In the most extreme moments, even identity becomes negotiable. So the question gets sharper. What belongs to you in a way that does not require someone else as permission to remain yours? What crosses borders without needing an escort? What survives a new rulebook? This is where the answer stops being romantic and starts being practical. Skills are the only truly portable wealth because they are weightless, internal, and demonstrable. A skill does not need a registry to exist. It does not require the market to be open for you to hold it. It sits in your hands in your judgment. And when the world becomes unstable, the world pays for judgment. That's why when Vietnamese refugees left by boat, by plane, through whatever narrow corridors were available, they often arrived in new places with almost nothing in material terms. No property that could travel, no storefronts, no land, no secure savings they could trust. Sometimes not even documents that could fully prove who they were. Their past became a ghost. The world did not care what you used to own. It cared what you could do now. Rebuilding did not start with grand speeches. It started with small exchanges. A mechanic fixing a neighbor's car for cash and a referral. A seamstress turning old fabric into new clothes because new clothes were too expensive. A cook working in a kitchen, learning the new language through orders and schedules. A student translating for parents, becoming the bridge between two economies. A nurse taking any shift available because care does not pause for politics. In those first months, pride becomes a luxury. But competence becomes a weapon, quiet, practical, undeniable. And here's the subtle truth. Even when credentials don't transfer, competence still transfers. A degree might not be recognized immediately, but the ability behind the degree is real. The hands that know how to repair, the mind that knows how to diagnose, the discipline that knows how to manage, the instinct that knows how to sell, those can be proven. Paper can be disputed. Performance is harder to dispute. In a new world that doesn't know you, your work becomes your introduction. That doesn't mean the process is easy. Transferability is not the same as comfort. A credential can be questioned. A license might not carry over. A language barrier can turn expertise into silence. Bureaucracy can demand that you prove yourself twice. Once to reality, and once to an office that has never heard your name. The world can be cruel to people rebuilding from zero. Yet even with those barriers, a skill remains something you can demonstrate. And demonstration is powerful because it bypasses reputation. It creates reputation. One solved problem becomes one referral. One referral becomes one opportunity. One opportunity becomes the first brick in a new foundation. This is the part modern viewers underestimate. Skills don't only provide survival, they provide leverage when leverage is scarce. In a stable world, a skill can feel like just a job, a small part of a larger machine. In an unstable world, a skill becomes a bargaining chip because needs are permanent even when money becomes uncertain. People always need repairs. They need healthcare. They need transport. They need food. They need shelter. They need childcare. They need education. They need coordination. And when formal systems become less efficient, the value of anyone who can reduce friction rises sharply. That is the difference between assets and abilities. Assets can be frozen, taxed, seized, revalued, regulated, or trapped in a market with no buyers. Abilities are harder to trap because they generate cash flow in real time. Abilities can operate outside formal channels when formal channels break. Abilities can adapt when the economy shifts from comfort to necessity. In calm years, society rewards optimization, titles, credentials, proximity to capital. In turbulent years, society rewards usefulness. It is not fair, but it is consistent. If you can fix what breaks, you become valuable. If you can heal what hurts, you become valuable. If you can move goods, maintain systems, teach skills, organize chaos, you become valuable. Vietnam 1975 made this brutally clear. Families that lost material wealth could still rebuild if they had people who could produce value. Families that kept some material wealth could still struggle if they lacked transferable capability. Because the most important question is not what did you have, but what can you generate now? And notice how the engine works. Skills create income. Income creates stability. Stability creates options. Options create the ability to invest again. That is rebuilding, not a miracle. A machine. Skills also carry a second advantage that is even more powerful. They are portable belonging. Rebuilding is never only a spreadsheet. It is also social physics. A person arriving in a new country has no local history, no network, no one to vouch for them. They are invisible. In that environment, skills are how you become visible without begging for permission. Your first job becomes your first network. Your performance becomes your reputation. Your reputation becomes trust. And trust becomes opportunity. This is how communities rebuild from the inside out. One customer becomes 10. One employer becomes a reference. One repaired engine becomes a neighborhood known for reliability. One small shop becomes a hub where language and information are exchanged. In immigrant neighborhoods, these micro-networks become an alternative infrastructure. Jobs move through word of mouth, resources are shared, childcare is coordinated, and survival becomes collective. Institutions may be distant, but trust is local. That is why the skills principle cannot be separated from the network principle. A skill gets you paid. A network gets you protected. A skill gives you independence. A network gives you resilience. Vietnam taught this to a generation the hard way. Isolated individuals are easy to break. Connected communities are harder to starve. And there's a philosophical layer here that most economic commentary misses. Skills are not only about income. They are about dignity. When people lose assets, they lose options. When they lose options, they lose agency. And when they lose agency, they become dependent on systems that may not care about them. Skills restore agency. They let you stand upright even when you have no documents, no property, no recognized past. They let you trade effort for survival without begging. They let you rebuild your identity from the inside out. Now bring this lesson forward to America 2025, where most people feel secure because their wealth lives inside institutions. Retirement accounts, brokerage accounts, home equity insurance promises, digital balances, and long chains of contracts that assume enforcement will always be smooth, and the rules will always be familiar. In normal times, that assumption is invisible. In stress, it becomes the main risk. Because the more your wealth becomes abstract numbers and databases, claims on claims, the more it depends on a system staying coherent. In a digital economy, everything runs through rails. Payment rails, identity rails, banking rails, platform rails. The convenience is extraordinary until it becomes a choke point. The same architecture that makes life frictionless can also make it controllable. When systems are stressed, access becomes the first lever pulled. Withdrawals can be limited. Transfers can be delayed. Rules can change. Employers can freeze hiring. Markets can seize up. And you don't need a dramatic regime change for this to matter. Even temporary disruptions teach the same lesson. When the machine stutters, permission gets rationed. This isn't a prediction that America will become Vietnam. It's a reminder that modern wealth is deeply institutional. If your life strategy depends entirely on institutions staying coherent forever, you are betting your future on a kind of stability history rarely guarantees. The hedge is not panic. The hedge is posture. Building forms of value that remain yours even if access narrows. So what is the practical takeaway without turning this into fear theater? It is simple, and it is old. Do not build your entire survival strategy on assets that require one set of rules to remain intact. Build a posture that survives rule changes. Portability, in the modern sense, is competence plus adaptability plus relationships. In a stable world, specialization wins. In an unstable world, adaptability wins. The ability to learn quickly, to operate without perfect conditions, to generate value in more than one way, to be useful when the economy shifts from luxury to necessity. Some skills are more crisis-resistant because they anchor to human constants: repair, care, food, logistics, construction, communication, negotiation. But the deeper point is not a checklist. The deeper point is agency. Skills give you agency because they give you options. And in the hard years, wealth is not a number. It is options. So ask the question Vietnam forces on anyone who is honest. If your assets became trapped, if access became conditional, what would still be yours? What would still produce? What would still travel? If the system that validates your wealth became noisy, slow, selective, or unpredictable, what part of your life would remain liquid? Because in the end, collapse doesn't only change prices. Collapse changes the meaning of ownership. It changes the meaning of security. It changes the meaning of rich. In calm years, rich means having numbers. In turbulent years, rich means having options. The people who survive are rarely the people who guess the date correctly. They are the people who position themselves so they didn't have to guess. They built wealth that could move. They built value that could produce. They built capability that could not be frozen. Vietnam 1975 compresses this truth into one loud, unforgettable lesson. Property is local, but skills are global. Assets have gatekeepers, but skills don't. Money can be redefined, but competence remains tradable. Borders can harden, but usefulness still finds a way through. If this story leaves you with one uncomfortable clarity, let it be this: the only wealth guaranteed to move with you is the wealth inside you. And the smartest time to build it is when you don't yet need it.